Previously on our Kentucky Route Zero saga. So where the heck are we?
Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces?
Why are there bears there? Can you take a step back and describe what Route Zero is? It's like a donut, right, essentially?
Yeah, it almost... Is it a wormhole? Is it a...
Yes! You're getting the story as the person who's watching it, as the person who's playing the game, but your character isn't always the one that's telling you the story.
They've erected this museum there in its place, which is the Museums of Dwellings. It is essentially, it is literally what it is. It is a museum where everything that is on exhibit to see is just different manners of dwellings.
You meet a kid named Ezra, who talks about his fun with his friend Julian, who you come to find out is the Eagle.
I think you finally end up finding Dr. Truman in his home. He's a doctor, and he has a lot of debt, and because he has a lot of debt, he's kind of signed a deal with the devil in this case being a pharmaceutical company.
I love that he's like, yeah, I'm just going to put you under a general anesthetic, and you're going to count down from 5, and then as soon as you start countdowning from 5 and the words get really blurry, he's like, okay, great, now, is this a good time to talk about billing?
Welcome to episode 93 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we play Kentucky Route Zero Act 3. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have two friends with me. The first friend, you know him, you love him, his name is Michael Ruffalo.
I cannot wait to talk about this act.
Same here, and to talk about the act as well, joining us for the 5th time is Adam Iannetta. Adam, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me again. Great to be back.
You've become a permanent fixture in this series, so I don't see you going anywhere. This is Act 3 of Kentucky Route Zero. It's a game developed by Cardboard Computer, published by Annapurna Interactive. And if you're tuning in now without having listened to our other content related to this game, you might want to stop this one, go back to that, and then come back here. We'll be waiting for you when you're ready. So where we left off, gentlemen, we had just taken some interesting medication that may have left some lasting side effects. Am I correct to assume that?
You wake up without a leg.
Where's my leg?
Or some sort of strange, science-y sci-fi leg.
Yes, you become a hard time boy.
You do. You do. And I don't know if you guys felt this way, but immediately when we got into the scene, I just felt like the actual direction of the scene was something that we had only seen a few times. So imagine that, you're close up on two characters that are having coffee, the lighting's amazing, and you don't exactly know what's going on with your leg. And I just felt in this entire act, there was just so much confidence from a direction perspective.
Yes.
I had the fortunate chance this time to actually hook up my computer to my 48-inch TV at home to play this particular act, and I'm so glad that I was able to do that for this act, especially just because of what you were talking about before and the whole cinematic approach that they took to this act, and not to mention the overall length of this act compared to previous acts as well. So, but I completely agree with you.
When I completed this episode, I sat there, or this act, I guess, of the game, I sat there and I was like, oh my. I wasn't sure when we played the first act whether this would be a game I would be into and whether I would like. But I could not wait to talk to you guys about it. I sat there and I was like, well, we're going to record in a couple days. And I tried real hard to just be like, well, it's only going to be a couple days. I'll be able to talk about it then. But the only thing I could think about was this act. The entire time until I finally broke and posted in the Discord server like, hey, is anybody playing this game? Has anybody played this game? I really, 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 really want to talk with someone about it right now.
Yeah, and I think we just need to say that we have a rule on the podcast that you are not supposed to talk to the people you're podcasting with about the game, because then it kind of ruins the element of surprise. This is one of the first times, Mike, where you were like, I need to talk to someone!
Yes. Yes, there was deep excitement and passion, and what an experience.
So I want your hot take then. I kind of set the scene, but something very quickly happens where the scene shifts. Do you think the first part of scene 1 was an apparition? Do you think it was the drugs? Like, what do you think it was?
What do you mean? What do you mean an apparition?
So when the scene starts, you're having coffee with... I don't exactly know who you were having coffee with. Was it Weaver? Was it
Lisette or Lisette?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Lisette. Yeah.
And then the scene shifts very quickly, and the sun kind of comes up. And I don't know if it was like time had shifted or Lisette actually wasn't there, but like it very quickly went, okay, Lisette isn't here now.
So you might have, what you're saying is like, hey, is this an hallucination, a drug-induced hallucination, or is this a flashback? And I think it's both. I think this is something that happened to our man Conway, an experience he had with Lisette, which is kind of the backbone of this act. You find a lot of the backstory on Conway and Lisette and how they came to be and what ultimately happened to them. Or at least sets up a lot of what we're going to find out. And I think that was a memory that he had, and I think it was induced by the drug that he had taken, so that way they could fix his leg. And I think it just so happened to be very thematically appropriate that when the sun comes up in that scene, in that hallucination, in that memory, I think it's also the time in which the sun's coming up in his real world, so it just fit really nicely together.
Yeah, and
what do you think, Adam?
Well, I was going to say this isn't the first time that we've seen something like this happen for Conway, where he begins to zone out of the physical scene that he's present in at that time, and then begins to recall on something from his memory. There were a few times going back to Act 1 where. If you guys ended up going to the bait and tackle shop before meeting Shannon at Elkhorn Mine, there's a weird interaction with 2 or 3 fish tanks, and you end up getting electrocuted, and you have this flashback that's all dialogue based. You don't see any of it. It's all just based on text, where he's I can't remember the exact scene, but I'm pretty sure he's on the roof and he's waving down to Ira or something, who is the owner of the home that works with Lisette. So this isn't the first time this has happened, and I want to say something else happens similar to it when there's the cave-in at Elkhorn Mine, just before he comes to and realizes that his leg is broken.
When that kind of scene with Lisette finishes, the camera pulls back very slowly, and you get your first glimpse of your skeleton leg. What was your reaction when you saw that things might not be exactly as advertised, I guess?
I yelled, "It's debt! It's debt! Debt is the theme of this game." And I don't know why it took me so long to clue in. But at the beginning of Act 3 is when I realized the undercurrent and the common thread throughout almost every element of this game so far has been debt. The interludes have been about debt. The Hard Time Boys from Hard Time Whiskey is all about debt, and everything throughout this game, or especially this act, helped to emphasize that. So I don't know why I didn't piece it together when there were so many like very obvious discussions about like Weaver's family and Shannon's family and dealing with debt and running away from it and et cetera, et cetera. But finally, I feel like I figured it out.
Yeah, I think that at least I did clue in a bit during the entertainment, which was the second interlude that like, hey, we're talking about payday loans and we're talking about, socioeconomic factors that are maybe fueled by race as well. And I was like, is this that thing? And this episode definitely confirms that, hey, this game is about debt as its primary driver. And I don't know if that was sold to me before now. Like, I don't think they talked about it much before the entertainment, if I'm being honest.
Well, before the entertainment, you have elements where you find out that the Marquez family was in deep debt, And it didn't matter if you had a math degree and could do the most complex calculus in the world. You couldn't get yourself out of debt. And the more I sat there and thought about it, the more I realized there were other little, illusions, I guess might be the way to say it, but little hints, little discussions about debt throughout that were not subtle, but were just not something I sat there and I'm like, I wonder if this game's about debt. This act really just hammered home, like you said, and made really clear, like, this one is about debt. And I think now that we've got that out there, what else were your reactions when you saw Conway with the leg of a skeleton from the Hard Time Boys? And what do you think it means? Because Conway says, I think you get a choice of multiple reactions to have to it, but ultimately Conway kind of says, like, what did you do to my leg? Like, this is not my leg. And the good doctor says, I don't know what you're talking about. That's your leg. You could be hallucinating because of the drug, but that should go away.
That was what I was trying to figure out, because up until that point, I thought, okay, is Conway the only one that sees his leg looking the way it is, like this sort of electrified skeletal system, and everybody else sees it as his normal leg? And I started thinking back to what went on in the entertainment, and was that figure to the barfly looking like someone different to everyone else in the bar? And so I was so confused, and it was frustrating because everyone else seemed to think, no, you're hallucinating. There's no people in the basement.
Yeah, and I found by the end of it, he had almost been convinced that, like, it's probably in his head, and that I think the choices I went with were like, I'm used to side effects. I guess it's fine. I guess it'll wear off. It's fine. Which to me was like, that sounds like when a doctor prescribes you something to, solve the symptoms of what you're going through and not the actual problem, what you end up just settling on after being told multiple times that no, it's fine. This is the way it is.
Sounds like you have some experience with that kind of diagnosis, Jacob.
Not gonna get into it. Not gonna do it. I'm just gonna enjoy my nice whiskey here that I poured myself for this exact occasion. That's all I got.
I don't know where we were. Sorry.
The funniest piece of dialogue for me was when they said, hey, you need to keep your leg free of debris. And they said, what can you clean it with? He's like, only clean your leg with a moistened cloth with water or isopropyl alcohol. I'm like, do they know what's going on with the leg? I digress. The writing was very good in places in this act.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. I think we've talked in the past about the writing being good, especially in the entertainment. Mm-hmm. But I think, kind of like what you had said at the beginning, at the top of this episode, Jacob, there is a real confidence and a real sense of, like, direction, where they're not just allowing the player to, text adventure their way through this. Like, it's guiding you, it's holding the frame, it's making a really curated experience, and I love it. I, without a doubt, love the heck out of it.
Would you say that this game has an invisible hand? Sorry, economic stroke. I digress.
When we first started this series, I talked about how I'm not a big fan of point-and-click adventure games and text-based games, but this game, especially this act, has certainly converted me. So I'm very, very pleased with what I've seen thus far, and I cannot wait to continue on.
You go from here to a tree, right?
First, you go back to the Museum of Dwellings, and then from there, it's the tree.
Yeah, and you go to the tree because your van actually just breaks down. It's an old van, and it breaks down, and you're by a tree that reminded me a lot of, like, the cover of the Joshua Tree album by U2. It's a very large tree. But you are there with Ezra, Conway, and Shannon, and that's when you meet new characters, right?
That's right, Junebug and Johnny.
Yeah, and again, the direction here was just, like, fantastic.
Amazing. Okay, so one, we should get out of the way. Very clear reference to June and Johnny Cash. And yes, like, very, very clear reference. And we will see more hints to that as it goes on. But I think this is a perfect point to also talk about some of the literary-ish references throughout. That tree looks a heck of a lot like the tree in Waiting for Godot, which when I saw that, I was like, I don't remember a whole lot about Waiting for Godot, but I do remember that Adam brought this up, and I do remember that tree, and holy cow, there we go.
I instantly made note of that when Shannon is attempting to fix the truck, and the first line she says after that is "nothing to be done," which is the first line of the scene in that play when I think it's Estragon says it to Vladimir, and I thought, oh, this is Waiting for Godot. This is the tree. They're going to hang themselves. What's going on? So it was. I'm pretty sure I saw Samuel Beckett's silhouette somewhere in the scene as well. But
yes. So we meet Junebug and Johnny, and they're riding in a sidecar motorcycle, and this is another moment in which I think the game does something really cool that we do not see often, which it reminds you that, like, you're not always playing from the character that you first started with, and you're not always playing from the first person perspective. You jump into Johnny and Junebug deciding whether you're going to go and stop at the side of the road and help Conway, Shannon, and Ezra with their broken down car. And it was, I thought, really funny to control both the dialogue of Johnny and the dialogue of Junebug, where Johnny's like, I think we should stop. Like, I think there's a good, we should probably stop. Like, what's the worst that it could do? And Junebug's like, you know what? We're already late. And this was, for me, one of, as dumb as it is, one of my favorite little references, because you realize that they are on their way to Harry's bar, which we've just experienced in the entertainment. It's like, this is a game that's wrapping back in on itself and folding and creating layers upon layers, and it was just so exciting. What were your reactions when you realized that?
My first reaction was, seeing that, okay, so this is the Junebug and Johnny that we've been waiting for. And so my thought was, okay, they clearly didn't make it by the time that this Hard Times boy made it to the diner. So my curiosity at that point is, are we actually going to go to that diner or to that bar and see what happened? And so that was my that's where my thought process went at that point. What's going to happen next?
Yeah, my thought was like, am I going to get a choice here to either stop or not stop? Will that affect the story, and will it kind of branch off from there? Sorry, bad pun. But I think what I just really appreciated is that the direction. If you're looking at the motorcycle and the sidecar, the entire time that you're having a conversation, the camera is swinging around the actual motorcycle of Johnny and June as they're going on it. And then also cutting back and forth between Shannon and Conway and Ezra. And at one point, they're on the side of the road, and the motorcycle just rips by, and they're just like, jerks, because they kick up a bunch of dust when they do it. So I thought there would be choice. There wasn't. But I was very happy with where it went after this scene.
I ended up spending a lot of the conversation as Junebug saying, like, nah, I don't really want to stop. I don't think we should, until finally in the end she relents, and we pull over to the side of the road, and that's when we meet. And I say we meet, but it's I guess we are both characters at the same time, or both parties coming to meet each other.
The formal we?
Yes, exactly, the formal we. And so I don't quite remember exactly what happens that leads to it, but we end up having a conversation where Junebug and Johnny convince Conway, Shannon, and Ezra to come to them with their show. And they decide to do that because they're like, well, Harry might stiff us if people aren't there. So if some people come along, I think we'll stand a good chance at making sure we get paid. And that's the biggest thing, especially because we're late.
one of the best parts about the interaction between Conway and company and then Junebug and Johnny is the choice between whether you want to answer as Conway, Shannon, or Ezra. And so, anytime you respond as Ezra, it's always just so endearing because he'll ask them silly questions like, "Are you guys being chased by dinosaurs?" or "Are you pirates based on the way you're dressed?" And lovingly, they actually, humor his questions and they'll answer them. Whereas, anytime you try to answer as Conway, he can't even get his first word out without Junebug cutting him off. Like, you'll be given a full option of dialogue like, "Well, we really have to get going," but Junebug will instantly cut you off. "Then it's settled. You're coming with us." So...
I love that. I didn't know that was the case. I always picked Ezra as the dialogue option. Which is also, I think, the moment that you realize that Junebug and Johnny are like androids. They're like robots.
Yeah, what the heck? Why are they robots?
Wait.
That's a good question.
Wait, when did we figure that out?
Okay, so
what is happening?
Yes, there are a couple of key signs. One is that when they move, there's exactly, you can hear the servos inside them buzzing and beeping along. But that's not totally enough to give it away. Then there's a conversation with Ezra and Junebug, I believe, where Ezra, this could be entirely optional. I don't know if you need to have this conversation, but I had it. And Ezra says, like, "Why do you look like a punk?" And Junebug says, like, "Oh, I mean, I didn't realize I looked like a punk. Like, this is just my form of self-expression." And she explains that she was like one of the many other robots that was designed to just be mining. And which I think, if my hypothesis is correct, she was part of the group of robots that was sent down into the Elkhorn mine in the Zero to do the mining after all of the miners drowned. And she tells the story about how they set aside and they waited and they found this cassette with the music, which I think is the music that Shannon's parents had recorded in the mine as part of their cultural ethnography or anthropology of the folk music there. Don't stop me now. Keep trying to be dialed into my conspiracy theory here. So then they hear that and they decide, I am not just a robot. I need to live a full life. And they sneak out and they slowly piece together their aesthetic through a bunch of clothes that they find. And I don't know how much of this is stuff that I made up versus stuff that I'm connecting dots that don't actually exist versus connecting dots that do exist. But boy, am I in love with this story.
This just went completely over my head. And now I need to go back and replay this entire act just for that bit.
Two things. First, Mike, you remind me of that GIF from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
It's Pepe Silvia. It's Pepe Silvia.
Did I finally get it? I got it. It's Pepe Silvia.
It's Pepe Silvia.
But are you sure that both of them are robots?
That's a good question. I am fairly confident because in that dialogue exchange, Junebug says both of them and not just one of them. She says, like, we hid. So I'm not 100% sure, but I expect that it's both of them.
Yeah, because my initial thought was, and it's kind of built on what happens immediately after what we're talking about, is I think I can say with almost 100% certainty that Junebug is a robot because her skin tone is more gray compared to some of the other characters in the game. You hear the servos, but when she sings, which is my favorite part of this entire act, it may be one of the best things in this entire video game so far, but she has a robotic voice that is actually, funny enough, it's Ben Babbitt that's singing with a vocoder or whatever, like a voice modulator.
Pitches it up, right?
But my thought was like, oh, got the robotic voice, maybe a robot that likes to sing. Not 100% sure that Johnny's a robot, but I can say that Junebug is a robot. You're saying 100%. That's my thought.
Yeah, I'm not 100%, but I feel pretty good about that.
Do we want to talk about the really good moment where Junebug sings and it's a beautiful moment?
100%.
Well, I mean, yeah, all I wanted to say was, there was a point here where we were able to go back to Equus Oils, And you could decide to go and talk to Joseph and have a conversation about Lula Chamberlain. I did not take this choice. I knew it was there along the way, and I thought, if I go back, I could talk to him. But I was just so like laser focused on spending more time with Junebug and Johnny and getting there that I went straight to the bar. I went straight to Harry's bar.
Mike likes the robots. I get it.
I love them.
I was the same.
I love them.
I didn't even realize that there was an option to go to Equus Oils, and so my perfectionist, completionist mentality is just twitching and grinding its teeth inside of me right now. So, again, another reason to go back and revisit this beautiful act. So,
I heard the song "Too Late to Love," and I'm not ashamed to admit that I have added it to my Spotify liked songs because it is, I think someone described it as whisper wave in the actual game. And as a fan of synth wave as a genre, like this was entirely my ish.
So we should, I guess, explain just a little bit before we get to the song. You get to the bar and Harry says, like, look, it's the early hours. No one's here. I don't know why you're so late. Obviously, you can't go on. And Junebug points back to Conway, Shannon, and Ezra, and she's like, look, you got a full bar. You got a lot of people here. It's time, right? We're just going to do one song. It's going to be quick. And that's what we're going to do. And Harry's like, fine. Like, do what you do. And Junebug and Johnny set up, and they start playing, and they literally tear the roof off the place.
Every musician's dream.
It was so not only like musically brilliant, like I loved it. I just gushed. I wanted to tear up. But it was also visually stunning. So as the song starts, you choose the lyrics that they're going to be singing about. You kind of decide the theme of the song. And then as the song progresses, the roof of the bar kind of gets peeled away, and you're left with just this beautiful night sky, and the lyrics just scrolling through it with stars, and it was such an amazing moment. Like I know that Mo will hate this, like, just so much of this game, like just so much. But I feel like if Mo saw that moment, I feel like he would like this game. Like I think he would be there.
I think he'd find a way to add guns to it, to be honest with you.
That's a fair point. Yeah. How would I be able to do this in Unity, but with guns?
Yes.
So, but all of that aside, what did you choose the song to be sung about?
I'm trying to remember, because I remember picking lyrics that I thought were actually pretty pleasant, and then the rest of the stanza became very, very sad and very depressing, and I would think to myself, oh, that's not what I wanted. It's still gorgeous, but it was almost like a misdirection at that point. Like, oh, let's choose these happy lines. It's like, oh, surprise, it's actually a Portuguese fado, and it's actually a really sad song that just sounds happy. So
I will be honest with you, and I was sitting on the couch playing this, and this scene happened, and I imagine, like, I slunk into the couch and was just like, oh yeah, this is great. And I just picked the first option that was on there. Like, I didn't even think, because I was so enthralled by, like, the actual visual direction of it, that's why I listened to the song a bunch afterwards, because it's a 6-minute song. If you listen to the actual soundtrack, that is picked one of the directions that is about love and about leaving that love and it being too late, being bound to fate. Like, that's the version in my mind, because I don't remember how I played it.
Gotcha. Okay. So did you guys pick up on the connection between Conway and Lisette?
I didn't know it was going to be Lisette, but by the end of this act, I started to put together pieces from the song and what we discover towards the very end of the act. But
yes. So what we come to find out is this is apparently an old song that June and Johnny have heard before, and this is their take on it. And it's really a song where the singer's singing about being heartbroken after being left by their lover, who they then see years later. and they want to steal them back, which, we're kind of spoiling a lot of this game, is what we come to find out the story between Conway, Lisette, and Ira. And it struck me as like, oh man, even more of this game just like folding in on itself and just creating more like layers and levels to look at it from. It excited me so much, in addition to just being a song that like kind of tore my heart out, and I love it so dearly. I thought it was like such a great piece of music that as soon as that clip of song was done, I pressed the Xbox guide button so the story would be paused and frozen, and then I looked up song from Act 3, Kentucky Route Zero, and I found anything that I could read on it, and I think I sent it to you in our Discord chat, trying not to break the rule of talking about it, but also being like, wink nod, we're gonna have to talk about this.
Yep.
And what you sent us was Lewis Gordon's piece from Fact magazine called Kentucky Route Zero, How Ben Babbitt Scored a Lynchian Modern Classic, right? So what did you, I don't know how much you want to say here, but what did you pull from that article?
Well, there are a couple of things that I pulled away. First, I felt so secure hearing someone else say that this game was Lynchian. It just made me feel so much better about my like read of it, that I wasn't missing something huge, and that yes, it is indeed like a David Lynch film. But it just made me take a step back and realize there have been really good like eerie soundtrack, soundscape, like throughout the game. And when I felt that this game was extremely dark and eerie to begin with, a lot of it, came from the music as well. And it just was stuff that I was not paying attention to, and it gave me a huge appreciation for it, as the game progressed.
I think one thing that you mentioned before we started recording, though, is that if people are curious about that article, it has Act 4 spoilers in it, so they might want to wait till the series is done to read it, right?
Proceed with caution.
The one other thing I would want to mention about this scene, which is that Junebug somehow in the performance, I don't know when it happens, but her clothes transform into this bright blue, baby eggshell blue dress, and it looks just like a dress that I've seen June Carter Cash wearing,
really,
in multiple images and clips, etc., etc. So I think it was just another one of those moments where they're nodding to Johnny and June Carter Cash.
But Johnny Cash never played the keytar, did he?
It's a good question. I wouldn't put anything past the man. He once shot a man in Reno just to watch him die.
Oh my god!
There it is. There it is. The next scenes in Kentucky Route Zero are scenes 5 to 11, and I think I just want to talk about them maybe together because they all kind of are part of one big chunk. It's going to the Hall of the Mountain King, Xanadu, back to the Hall of the Mountain King, where the strangers come from, back to the Hall of the Mountain King, back to Xanadu. So I think maybe we should talk about that whole section of the game next. You come upon the Hall of the Mountain King, which is just this disastrous mess of technology and fire and metal. Is that a fair assessment of what we see when we come into it?
When I first saw the title of the location appear on the map in the Zero, my first thought was, that's an odd name for it. Is this like something out of the Lord of the Rings? And then when you go inside and see what it is, I felt a little silly. I thought, oh my gosh, we're actually in Mordor now. We've completely left Kentucky, and now we're in Mordor. Not only are there, Beckett references and Lynch references, there are Tolkien references now, and so that's all I could think of at this point. Just
yeah, and it's such a weird moment too when you roll up to this cave, because the road just ends, and you have to get out and you walk up this long stairway, and you get all the way up to the top, and you just see, like, to me, it just looked like a bunch of computers on a pile that are on fire, and there's just a bunch of people standing around it acting as if that's a completely normal, non-weird thing. And did you guys did you talk with all of the people? Because I definitely did not. I talked with only the people that I really needed to.
Yeah, so I spoke to everyone kind of my first time around because I wanted to know where the heck I was. Because like you said, Mike, it's a mess of wood and like not logs, but like wood of different shapes, and then like maybe Mac 2 computers and just fire. I spoke to a few of so you speak to a few of the assistants of the main character in that, Donald. Yeah, you speak to Donald and then a bunch of his assistants. You talk to Amy. You talk to some of his other assistants because I just wanted to know what was going on. And I don't know if I necessarily got that many answers, except that like maybe Donald's high on some form of mold that was in the computers. That's all I kind of got from it.
There was one character, especially for me, that just left me completely confused. I think his name was Andrew, and he said his job was all about the details. He had to memorize all of the finite details about his surroundings. And at one point, he gets you to close your eyes, and so the screen gets black, and he tries to do this visualization game with you. And then at one point, he just completely messes up and says, "Oh, darn it, I forgot." And then you just snap to again. And I was left so confused and thought, okay, no, what was the point of that? Did I click something incorrectly, but if you guys have any sort of information on how that scene was supposed to go, I was literally left in the dark because my eyes were closed at that point. And then he just told me, "Oops, sorry."
No, I don't remember going through that visualization game, and from the sound of it, Mike didn't either. So I don't know what to say. Like, all that I know is in this section, I felt as though I would say that this is my least favorite section of the game, just because I was left with so many unanswered questions.
Well, I also didn't love. This is a section that again kind of folds in on itself, where you find out that Donald has created a computer simulation that is able to replicate essentially the world that you're in. And the thing that prevents it from acting as it should, which when you first go to use it, it's completely bonkers. It just doesn't make sense. It looks like it's glitching out. What you find out is there's this mold that's growing on top of the chips, and that's preventing it from, working correctly. So you end up dealing with that and using the computer, and it is essentially simulates the exact situation you're in. It simulates, people coming. It simulates hiring research assistants and assigning them to different parts of the simulation, whether to improve it or to theorize about it or to transcribe the things.
And it's a game within itself.
Yes, it is a full game within itself.
Because we heard you like games, so we put one inside of another.
They exhibited us. And as much as I love all the moments that this game kind of folds in on itself, this to me was the part that felt the most tedious until I got to, understanding kind of the story that it was, getting at and explaining.
Some of the really interesting bits of dialogue from Donald, the character kind of situated as the king of this mountain, is he talks about the current state of Xanadu and this computer system and refers to it as entropy. And I thought to myself, that's a pretty big word that I don't know about. So I looked it up, and it has a dual meaning where it can refer to the thermodynamic properties of a computer, or it refers to a complete state of chaos. And I kind of thought, okay, well, which one is he referring to? Is he referring to the fact that, this computer is now on fire and the sort of symbiotic relationship the computer system had with this black mold? Or is it the fact that, you're literally standing in front of this tower of computers that is now just on fire, which is in and of itself chaos? And there was the other word he said, senescence, which is the idea of as something ages, it begins to wear and tear and degrade. And it was interesting to see that when we first interact with Xanadu, and he goes on to say, it's been so long since last anyone's been properly able to use Xanadu, and now it's its fall into senescence, into this entropy, and it was a really interesting moment.
My only kind of galaxy brain moment with this section was figuring out that the story that's being told in this adventure game that you're playing on Xanadu, which is essentially like an old Apple II computer that needs to be degaussed every other minute, is that there are ties between the story that's being told on that adventure game and the first interlude, the limits and demonstrations that we played in the Lula Chamberlain Namjoon Payak. Adam, you said it in the...
I pronounce it as Namjoon Payak, but I mean that might just be my Michiganian accent. So,
so that the story from that interlude and the story from this adventure game in the third act are the same, just being told via different media. Whether it's the tape media in the interlude, or the computer in Act 3.
Break that down for me. Do you remember in Interlude 1 how you could go up and interact with a bunch of tape that was just kind of out there, a storm
and you
cloud of tape.
Exactly, you could feed it into a machine and it would tell you kind of what it was saying. So to me, the story that was being told in that interlude and the story being told in this adventure game were the same, just the one in Act 3 gave you a lot more detail and control over your actions.
Right. Okay. Yes, because what's really clear is that it's kind of retelling the story of how they got into this situation. And every time that you hire a new assistant and run a new day, it'll spit out the different percentages that you've accomplished by doing that. And one of the percentages is romance. And I think what ends up being really clear, and it kind of ties back into the song that Junebug was singing, is that Donald had some feelings for Lula Chamberlain, and they were not reciprocated. When she later returns into the scene, it is not a warm reunion at all. She's left him to his madness in the cave.
If you guys remember in Act 1, when Conway is searching for the directions to the Zero on Joseph's computer, you're able to check his emails, and there's actually one from Donald that, I mean, at that point in Act 1 doesn't make any sense, but talks about returning to the cave and how Xanadu needs you. And so you again, it's that whole idea about layers falling into each other and realizing that Joseph was a part of this whole excursion into the cave system, and that, Donald was the one that really dedicated his life to it, whereas Joseph and Lula said, no, you know what, we belong on the surface, so that's where we need to be.
Functionally with this adventure game, I played through it twice, or not twice, but I died in it. Did you guys die in this adventure game?
You could die?
How?
Sorry, by die I mean your characters in the adventure game could die. There's a hole in the adventure game itself, and if you don't throw a rope down, you die in the game, and you get a score of 0. And it actually says like game over, score 0, and you have to just go back to when you're at the hole and just throw a rope down to not die.
I knew you were not good at video games, but I didn't think you'd be able to die in an adventure game.
Hey, I did it.
In a text-based adventure game, you found a way. You are like nature. You find a way. You will butt up against the ends of the possibility space.
I'm like the theme song of Drake and Josh. I find a way. I find a way.
Great. You've broken Adam.
I'm sorry. I just... That was one of my favorite series growing up as a kid, so... Headaches.
We have a childhood Nickelodeon fan in the house.
Headaches. You give me headaches. I'll stop.
Oh, and Mike's just like, I didn't watch TV. I was reading books.
Yeah. Well, anyway. So Jacob found a way to die. I did not know that was possible.
No.
I think that's amazing. Does it have anything to do with the point in the graveyard, or is it somewhere entirely different?
No, it's just in the actual Xanadu game, and it's when there's the hole that's covered in black mold, where it's like this black mold is wet. You need to use a rope, and if you don't use a rope, your characters just die.
Gotcha.
Safety first.
Safety first.
Yeah. So I did bring up the graveyard. Should we talk about what happens there before we get to that scene?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of quickly set it up, and then we can go from there. The scene is there's 2 times you go to the graveyard. There's one time while you're looking for how to power Xanadu or how to fix Xanadu, and then there's a time at the end of the game. And what happens is your group splits up when you get to this new graveyard. Essentially, you kind of go up to a graveyard, and there's a church at the graveyard. Conway and Shannon go to that church, and you play as Ezra and I think Junebug, who are just kind of looking around trying to kill time in the graveyard. And Ezra's just like, look, a gravestone! Look, a gravestone! And Shannon and Conway come back not having told you what happened at the church, because you get a flashback at the end of the game to say exactly what happened there.
But they're super weirded out. Like,
yeah.
That's the takeaway. That they're extremely weirded out, and they're like, this is not the time to talk about it.
Yeah. We might tell you sometime, but probably not.
Yes. Which, to me, like, from a storytelling perspective, was extra genius and beautiful, because they take the characters that you feel like you know the best and that you have the most information on, who you've been making choices for, and they suddenly say, and they've just had a whole adventure that has left them shook, and you know nothing about it. I thought that was so cool.
I actually thought this was going to be a moment similar to what we experienced in the St. Thomas Church of Act 2, where I was under the impression, depending on the answers you picked, you could potentially end up being Shannon and exploring into the storage facility, or just sticking around as Conway. And so I thought to myself, well, okay, looking around these gravestones is fine and all, but I wonder if there was an answer I could have picked that would have just let me play out Shannon and Conway's experience. So I'm so happy that by the end of the game, we finally got to experience their side of this story.
So should we hop into that then? Should we explain the next section?
Yeah, because this is when the game kind of got back to, okay, the middle section, I don't know, I had a lot of unanswered questions that I'm sure will be addressed later, but the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces and kind of where the strangers come from, like, that to me is another solid piece of the game that I really like. So you go back to the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces because you still, I guess, don't have the address to get to 5 Dogwood Drive, because I guess we're still doing that. And really that is used as a setup for the flashback that happens, because Conway's like, yeah, I guess I'm busy tomorrow. I'll tell you about it later. And then it flashes back to them going into the church, and really the church just being the entrance to Hard Times Whiskey Distillery.
Yes, and there is a really interesting conversation that Shannon and Conway have on the pew of the church before we find out it's kind of a trapdoor that gets you there, where Shannon says that she just kind of assumed that Weaver had died, right? That when Weaver disappeared, she was just dead. But one of the things that, you know, made her think otherwise now, or recently freaked her out, was she saw Weaver on the screen of a TV that she had repaired, which brought me right back to the beginning, which was one of the first dialogue options you have, where you choose, oh, well, Mom said the TV is a gateway for the ghosts, or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it again kind of made me feel like the game was referencing itself and you know, looping in on itself, and thought that was a super interesting, like, little tidbit. And then it's like, oh, by the way, there's a whole distillery underneath you. And not only is there a whole distillery underneath you, nobody in this distillery is weirded out at all that you just stumbled into it. Yeah. There's just a very warm welcome by a skeleton-looking hard time boy who's just like, oh, great, yeah, you're finally here. Great, you're just about late. Let's get you through the onboarding process. And throughout this experience, you can always kind of go back to saying, like, but actually, I'm just here for directions. I just kind of got lost. I need to leave. And they essentially onboard you like you're an employee, or the newest employee, into Hard Time Liquor or Hard Time Whiskey. Yeah.
And so Doolittle is the character that kind of walks you through
Doolittle.
this.
That's his name.
And my thought initially was, he thinks I'm part of this, because of my leg. Right?
Ooh.
Oh, I didn't even think of that, but that makes sense.
His leg is the same kind of texture as Doolittle, who's this walking skeleton man. So my thought was, because, what's talked about a lot here is that people in this situation have debts to pay, right? So if he has a skeleton leg, much like a lot of the other skeleton men and women that are in the actual facility, maybe he just assumes that I'm here because I owe a debt because of my really, really awful leg.
Good connections. That makes a lot of sense. And I wasn't quite sure if I had clued that all in together. But that makes a lot of sense.
That was one of the really troubling aspects about this entire scene. As much as I loved it, there was always, this thought in the back of my mind, like, this is absolutely horrible because, this character Doolittle is just the most happy-go-lucky character you can find, and he's going on and explaining or talking to you and introducing you to all of these different people who work in this distillery and talking about how none of them are here because of their own free will or choice. I mean, they didn't just apply on Indeed.com to work in a distillery. They're only here because they're paying off their debt, and it seems as though they're never going to be able to finally pay off their debt. And there was the one gentleman, I can't remember his name, but it was something as if he was a lumberjack, and the wood he supplied was filled with termites, and so it ended up ruining a whole batch of their wood and for their casks. And he said, it's not his fault, but debt's got to be repaid. So moving on, and just says it so nonchalantly.
The one thing I just want to touch on is we talked about kind of visually what the characters look like, but you picked up like a little button on your UI that you could use after the Xanadu section that allowed you to degauss the screen. Now that was used largely for Xanadu, but you could use it at the Hard Time Distillery as well. And when you hit that degauss button, some of the characters that are like these electrical skeleton men, some of them that were working just would show back up when you degauss the screen. Not sure what that's all about, but I thought that was like a really cool visual element. The one thing, Mike, you sent us another article from Super Level, and I only pulled one thing from it, and that one thing is the inspiration for this location, and that it's based, what they thought is that it's based on either like a Bond villain's headquarters,
I can see that.
Enron. Which
Yes,
Enron makes a lot of sense here.
There's a real banality of evil here. And it's just that, like, I think it's Hannah Arendt concept, where it's that, the most evil structures just have just a real boringness to them. A real just, like, it just is what it is, It's not exceptional. It's not anything to write home about. It's there. And that's kind of the sense that you get of this distillery, that, everyone's like, well, and he just has crippling debt for the rest of his life now, and he's here. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And everyone, it just seems, and we see this with Conway, when he gets roped into it, just goes with it. There's no real fighting it. It's just, that's just what it is. That's just how it is. We're just in this really horribly evil system, and we're there. And I don't know if that's commentary on, debt itself being evil, or the suffocating nature of it, but it just is really just nothing to write home about. We're just here. We're just evil, and we're here.
I want to ask you a question, because there's one part of this that, like, some of it was crystal clear, but other parts I'm like, so Doolittle brings you over to a truck, and that's kind of, he's like, hey, here's your delivery van, because you're delivering casks now. This is your new job to work off your debt. And he starts showing you, like, the tires and the radio, and it's an adventure game, so you have text options. And one of the options at each of the ends of the conversations where you're talking about the wheels or the radio, it just allows you to kind of almost like remove yourself from the situation. And I don't know why and what that was referring to. So like one of the options would be like, we're talking about the radio, or the wipers, and he's like, hey, wipers are fine. Or the other option is they ditch class for the day to drive in the rain. And I had no idea what that referred to.
Well, what did you choose?
Well, I wanted to see what would happen, so I chose each time for the first 3 times, like the option that had nothing to do with what was going on, and the screen would fade to black, but then come right back. But I had no idea what was happening. So,
to me, okay, and Adam, I want to get your take on this too.
Galaxy brain me.
Yes, that was a moment of Conway essentially being impacted by the song that he heard earlier in the night, still having it reawakening feelings, images, etc. Especially the daydream or the hallucination or the memory that he woke up and started this whole act with. And he was going back and thinking about his experiences with Lisette and the story of him, Lisette, and Ira. And to me, it was one of those things that, he's been a delivery driver. He's done this for a long time. It was also probably the moment that he got into this line of work. So this is a part of his life that he can just zone out. Like, he doesn't need a deep attention to the windshield wipers. It's where his mind's naturally going to wander off and think about, the emotionally crippling thing that was just brought up throughout this whole episode.
The one thing I remembered as Doolittle is kind of showing you the ropes of this new truck is that if you remember from the second scene in this act where your truck has broken down, Ezra wants to play a little game with you. And so he grabs a tree branch and says, this tree branch is going to predict the future, your future, actually. And he says, I'm going to ask you a question, and then every option I'm going to snap off a separate branch, and then by the end of it, that'll be what actually happens. And he says, okay, let's figure out what your next vehicle is going to be. And he starts snapping off branches, and bicycle, tugboat, dinosaur, and then he finally lands on new truck. I guess you're going to end up driving a new truck in the future. And to me, that's what I saw when he was introducing him to this new truck. And I... Again, it's just newspaper clippings and bits of string all over the place.
Yes. It's Pepe Silvia.
Exactly.
My entire
again.
My entire house is my entire house is yarn and blood red notes scribbled on the wall with just a lot of circles around the word Conway. Conway is the center of this all, I'm sure. One of the other fun little bits here is they talk about how you have to really make sure the truck is in good condition because our last guy, he just crashed it. And, now he's on the line for all of the lost product. And it made me think right back to the very beginning of the game where the game opens up with pulling off the highway and hearing about how there was all this whiskey that just got into an accident or just got into a crash. I don't know if you guys remember that.
No.
But it's another one of those moments, which is why I love this game so much now, where it just folds in and references itself. And I feel like time is a circle, and something that I'm continuing to repeat ad infinitum.
At the end of this sequence, I kind of wish this game had a neck so that I could ring it. Because you get to the point where Doolittle's like, cool, tour's over, great job. Let's just have a celebratory drink of top shelf Hard Times whiskey stuff, which probably doesn't cost that much, right? And he's like, I don't want to do this. I'm not here to work. And he's like, well, you just kind of drank from that top shelf whiskey, which isn't cheap, and I just wasted a whole bunch of my time to give you a tour, which, again, waste of company time. It sounds like you're going to have to work that off. You have no other choice but to, I guess, come here tomorrow and just start working it off, which I was like, debt!
Super, super frustrating.
Yeah.
The other frustrating part is that, by the time you get to the end of this, 45-minute episode within the distillery, Shannon finally pipes up and says, look, we are not here for any of this. We have to figure out how to operate Xanadu. And Doolittle just casually says, oh, yeah, the computer? Oh, did you guys plug in the password? It's Domain Air. And at that point, I'm thinking to myself, okay, hang on a minute. This busted up dot matrix, oscilloscope piece of garbage isn't working properly just because the old man who's smoking black mold forgot the password? That's it?
See, I was so mad that I didn't even catch that because I was like, the man is putting me down?
I'm with you, Jacob. The other thing that I was very frustrated in this scene about was I don't remember exactly where I get this sense, but I remember substance abuse being kind of an issue and a thread throughout this game. I know Shannon talks about abusing Weaver's ADD medication, which is essentially meth. And clearly alcoholism was an issue in the entertainment. And I don't remember where I got the sense, but I got the sense that Conway had alcohol issues. And in this scene, you don't have a choice to drink or not. I waited as long as I could. And then eventually Conway just drinks and chooses the option for you. Because I guess they don't have a path where you don't drink. Because I sat there, I'm like, screw this. I'm not taking that drink. I'm not being a part of any of this. And you're kind of just railroaded into it. Do you guys remember any moments about substance abuse?
No, I don't.
Not that I can remember, but I felt as though there was a part before Conway accepts the drink that he made it seem like he was a recovering alcoholic and he didn't want to drink it, but I might just be making this up and pulling it out of thin air, but I'm not entirely sure about that.
Who knows? This could be a loose thread on my Pepe Silvia board. But I do feel like there is a sense of Conway being, a recovering alcoholic or having some substance abuse issues. So I will go back to the string and the board and see if I can figure out where I got that hint from.
And the episode just ends there. It's just like, yeah, I guess I'm working here in the morning. And then it just fades to black. Done.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
So much happens in this episode or this act. I remember feeling in the first one like, man, this is pretty slow. This does not go a whole lot of places. But this act just goes everywhere. You're going through the zero. You're going into a cave with a crazy supercomputer. You're going into a giant distillery with skeleton people who seem like they're electrified. You're tying all kinds of loose ends together and getting a real grip on the story. This was, for me, the highlight of the game so far, and I have been itching to play the next bits.
You guys, in a previous episode, when you were talking about The Walking Dead, or not The Walking Dead, but The Walking Dead game, The Last of Us, talked about how that was the video game that sort of inspired the idea that video games are works of art. And to me, this act of this game was that moment for me. And the entire time I thought to myself, if it is possible, this game has to be readapted as a TV series, like a Netflix original TV series, with themes of Twin Peaks, Stranger Things. Like, Netflix, if you are listening, please get on board. So
yeah, I mean without digging too deep into our discussion of The Last of Us, I feel like this game does what The Last of Us couldn't, which is it makes the gameplay of the game like crucial to the story. Like, the gameplay ties so tightly into what the game is about and what the story is that it's seamless. And I'm not sure you could do a better version of this as a movie or TV show, but Adam, I'm with you. I'd love to see someone try.
Wishing for a Netflix series will be the way that we end this episode, which is our 5th episode of our Kentucky Route Zero series. We've got 5 more to go, gents. So strap in and ready yourself for more content. If you want to find out more about our podcast, you can find out all the details at leftbehindgame.club, on Twitter at leftbehindclub, and on Instagram at leftbehindgameclub. If you want to join our Discord server and placate Michael and let him know that you are playing this game and you want to talk about it, you can find the link to that Discord at leftbehindgame.club. Michael, you just want friends to talk talking about this game.
I love talking with you, Jacob, and you, Adam, about this game, but I need more opinions. I need more takes. This game has gripped my imagination and I need to know more. So if you have some opinions and you are also playing this game, or if you're just starting, or you're even just curious about starting, you can find me at most social places online at RuffaloM. Feel free to shoot me a message there. I would love to discuss it with you. But more importantly, come into the Discord server, leftbehindgame.club, big button there that'll allow you to hop right in. There's a show discussion channel. I would love to see what big brain moments I might be missing.
Michael, you told the folks where folks can find you. Adam, again, your fifth time on the show. Woot, 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 woot. Thank you so much for coming on. If people want to find your work, where can they do that?
The best place for people to find me is just at my website, adamiannetta.ca. It's my online professional portfolio for my work as a singer, but just as well, I'm equally passionate about video games and also Drake and Josh. So that is the best place for people to find me. And likewise, it's been an amazing experience to work with such wonderful people on such an incredible piece of art. And that's all I can say at this point. So thank you guys.
And you can find me on the internet at Jacob McCord on all major social media platforms and at jacobmccord.com. I make YouTube videos from time to time as well. So if you want to check that out, you can do that at youtube.com/Jacob McCord. I almost forgot it, but there it was. And Michael, what do we say to him?
That, my friends, is one less game left behind.